October 1st, 1975. The Philippine Coliseum is a suffocating furnace, temperatures soaring past 120 degrees under the searing glare of television lights. Two men, unrecognizable through the swelling and the blood, stand in the center of the ring, trading blows with a concussive force that defies human physiology. This is not merely a sporting event. It is a desperate, terrifying struggle for survival. How far can the human body be pushed before the mind simply refuses to continue? In the brutal climax of their legendary rivalry, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier answered that question by dragging each other into the deepest abyss of physical and psychological endurance. The Thrilla in Manila would become the ultimate crucible where the heavyweight title was decided, but the true cost of their ambition would echo for the rest of their lives. To understand the sheer violence of Manila, one must first grasp the bitter, decade-long collision course that brought them there. By 1975, the saga had already transcended boxing, becoming a deeply personal war of contrasting ideologies and fighting styles. Frazier had shattered the champion's aura of invincibility in 1971, while Ali exacted his revenge in a grueling 12-round decision 3 years later. The animosity was not manufactured for the cameras. It was a visceral, burning hatred that fueled their every waking moment. The charismatic and cruel poet relentlessly mocked his opponent, painting him with deeply offensive caricatures that scarred the proud warrior from South Carolina. For Frazier, the insults were unforgivable betrayals, transforming his training into a dark, singular mission to silence his tormentor permanently. In the sweltering gyms of Philadelphia, Frazier prepared with a terrifying, monastic intensity. He pushed his VO2 max, the maximum rate at which the heart, lungs, and muscles can effectively use oxygen during exercise, to elite endurance levels through endless miles of road work in heavy boots. Every heavy bag session was a visualization of his rival, every thunderous left hook a physical manifestation of his accumulated rage. Ali, conversely, arrived in the Philippines cloaked in overconfidence, treating the early days of his camp as a chaotic circus of media appearances and distractions. However, as the tropical heat began to sap his energy during sparring, a chilling realization set in. He recognized that his opponent was not a broken man, but a highly weaponized adversary, prepared to die in the ring, forcing an abrupt shift into a punishing regimen of physical conditioning. The morning of the fight dawned with a thick, oppressive humidity that immediately compromised both athletes' thermoregulation. Inside the galvanized tin roof of the Coliseum, the air was stagnant, heavy with the breath of 28,000 spectators. Stepping through the ropes, they were entering a literal oven where the simple act of breathing required extreme exertion. The opening bell unleashed a furious, technical assault. The defending champion initiated the bout with blinding speed, utilizing rapid combinations and precise footwork to keep the challenger at the end of his lethal jab. He sought to exploit the biomechanics of the ring, the study of the mechanical laws relating to the movement or structure of living organisms, by constantly shifting angles to neutralize the devastating forward momentum coming his way. But Frazier was an unstoppable force of nature, a relentless engine of pressure that refused to be deterred by the stinging leather snapping his head back. He bobbed and weaved under the guard, unleashing vicious, bone-cracking hooks to the ribs and kidneys. This was a calculated strategy of attrition, designed to drain the aerobic capacity of his dancing opponent and anchor those famous legs to the canvas. By the middle rounds, the elegant science of pugilism had devolved into a raw, gladiatorial slaughter. The intense heat accelerated their dehydration, thickening their blood and forcing their hearts to pump at dangerous, unsustainable rates. Every clinch became a desperate wrestling match for oxygen, their bodies slick with sweat and pushed far beyond their lactate threshold, the point where lactic acid rapidly accumulates in the blood, causing agonizing muscle fatigue. Yet, even as their bodies screamed for relief, the psychological warfare never ceased. Ali would lean heavily on the back of his opponent's neck, a grueling tactic meant to exhaust the challenger's legs, while whispering taunts into his ear. Frazier, his face contorted in a mask of grim determination, would simply smile through bloody teeth, driving his fists deeper into the midsection and demanding more. The narrative of the fight shifted dramatically in the 10th round. The champion, seemingly running on empty, suddenly found a hidden reservoir of energy, snapping his rival's head back with a series of brutal pinpoint right crosses. The sheer concussive impact began to visibly dismantle the challenger's defenses, closing his left eye entirely and leaving him terrifyingly vulnerable to punches he could no longer see coming. What the roaring crowd and even the champion did not know was that Joe Frazier was fighting legally blind in his right eye, the result of a training accident years prior. With his left eye now swollen shut from the relentless assault, he was navigating the ring in near total darkness. He was reacting to the sound of breathing and the shift of the canvas, fighting purely on instinct and an unbreakable will. Across the ring, Muhammad Ali was experiencing his own private hell. The accumulated damage to his internal organs from the relentless body shots was catastrophic, sending waves of blinding pain through his nervous system. Between rounds, the usually vibrant champion slumped heavily on his stool, reportedly telling his corner that this was the closest thing to dying he had ever experienced. Rounds 13 and 14 stand as a monument to human endurance and the terrifying capacity for self-destruction. Exhausted beyond measure, the champion stood flat-footed and delivered a barrage of sickening, unanswered blows to the head. The challenger's mouthpiece went flying into the crowd, yet he continued to march forward into the fire, a blind warrior refusing to yield an inch of ground. The human brain is encased in cerebrospinal fluid, designed to cushion it from everyday impacts, but it cannot withstand the repeated, high-velocity rotational forces generated by elite heavyweight punches. Both men were absorbing brain trauma that would permanently alter their neurobiology, their survival instincts completely overridden by the desperate, consuming need to emerge victorious. As the bell rang to end the 14th round, the atmosphere in the arena was one of horrified awe. Frazier stumbled back to his corner, his face a swollen, unrecognizable mass of bruised tissue. His legendary trainer, Eddie Futch, looked into the unseeing eyes of his surrogate son and faced the most agonizing decision of his career. Futch knew that sending a blind, exhausted fighter out for the final 3 minutes was a death sentence. Despite desperate pleas to continue, the trainer gently placed a hand on his fighter's shoulder and spoke the words that would echo through history. As Eddie Futch famously stated, "It is all over. No one will forget what you did here today." The moment the fight was stopped, the true extent of the physical toll was revealed. Upon realizing he had retained the title, the champion stood up, raised his arm in a fleeting gesture of triumph, and then immediately collapsed to the canvas, his body utterly drained of life force. He had won the battle, but the victory had required him to empty his soul. In the quiet, somber dressing rooms beneath the stadium, the magnitude of what had just transpired settled over both camps. There was no celebration, only the urgent work of medical teams tending to broken bodies and dangerously elevated blood pressures. The fierce hatred that had defined their rivalry had been burned away in the furnace of the ring, replaced by a profound, unspoken mutual respect born of shared trauma. The Thrilla in Manila forever altered the trajectory of their lives. Neither man would ever be the same athlete or the same person after that sweltering October morning. The extreme physical toll accelerated the decline of their careers, leaving invisible scars that would manifest in the years to come as severe neurological decline and chronic pain. Joe Frazier returned home a defeated challenger, but his performance cemented his legacy as a titan of unparalleled courage. He carried the bitterness of the insults for decades, a heavy burden that overshadowed his immense contributions to the sport. Yet history has rightfully elevated him, recognizing that his relentless heart was the immovable object that forced greatness out of his greatest enemy. For Muhammad Ali, the Manila fight remained the defining crucible of his legendary existence. He later admitted that his opponent was the greatest fighter of their era, next to himself, acknowledging the terrifying reality of how close he had come to the ultimate defeat. The fight stripped away the poetry and the bravado, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of his astonishing willpower. Their collision transcended the boundaries of sport, becoming a permanent case study in the extreme limits of human capability. It forces us to examine the terrifying intersection of ambition, pride, and physical endurance. They demonstrated that the human spirit can push the body far beyond the boundaries established by medical science, though always at a terrible, irrevocable cost. The true story of Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier's Manila fight is not merely a tale of a contest won or lost. It is a haunting, awe-inspiring testament to what happens when two unstoppable forces meet, demanding everything the other has to give. In the stifling heat of 1975, they did not just fight for a championship, they fought for their very survival, leaving a piece of themselves in that ring forever.